Is Mary Goodman, and I'm a member of the Weinberg College Alumni Relations and Development Team. And this panel today is part of our Waldron Student Alumni Connections program, where our goal is to help Weinberg College students explore various career paths by connecting you with alumni who can share more about the work they do, how they got to where they are today, and to provide insights and advice from their careers and their time at Northwestern. Today, we're excited to hear from 4 alums who leveraged their backgrounds in the sciences and pre-med into successful careers in a variety of different industries outside of going the traditional med school route. I also want to acknowledge that it's been a very stressful year, and we understand you're all balancing really busy schedules and a lot of different academic and extracurricular and personal commitments. So again, a sincere thanks for taking the time to be here today, particularly on a Friday afternoon. Before we get started, students, if you are able and comfortable, would love to ask for you to turn on your videos. No pressure if you're not able to, but ordinarily we would be doing these programs in person, so I know our alums would really value the opportunity to see your faces during our conversation today. And please note, we will leave the last 15 minutes of our program for student questions. So feel free to start brainstorming questions you might have for our panelists. And you'll have an option to either raise your hand and ask your question yourself, or if you prefer to ask anonymously, you can send your questions to me in the chat. So we'll get started with introductions. Our first panelist is Jill Prince, Deputy Director of Research at the NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, where she's worked since 2001. Jill graduated from Northwestern in 1999 with a degree in physics and astronomy, and went on to earn a master's in mechanical and aerospace engineering from George Washington University. Karen Dacres is Chief Legal Officer at Saildrone Incorporated, a technology company which designs, manufactures, and operates innovative, autonomous wind and solar powered ocean drones. She graduated from Northwestern in 1989 and double majored in chemistry and French, and she also holds a law degree from George Washington University. She lives in Maryland and splits her time between the East Coast and Saildrone's headquarters in the Bay Area. Rita Balice-Gordon is Chief Scientific Officer at Immunotherapeutics, a biotech company that transforms cutting-edge science into impactful therapeutics for patients with neurodegenerative diseases, and also entrepreneur in residence at Novo Ventures, a venture capital firm that builds biotech companies to discover and develop future medicines. Rita graduated from Northwestern in 1982 and with a degree in biological sciences, and she went on to do graduate work at the University of Chicago and the University of Texas, earning a PhD in neurobiology. She's based in the Philadelphia area. And finally, Robert Paredes is a Jackson & Coker Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Jackson Healthcare, based in Atlanta. And he's an accomplished award-winning sales leader with experience across the healthcare, medical, and dental industries. Robert is a 1987 Northwestern graduate and majored in political science and pre-med. So welcome to all of our panelists. And again, thank you so much for being here today. We'll go ahead and get started with some pre-prepared questions. And the first is that I gave some pretty long titles for each of you. So to begin, if you could tell our students a little bit more about what your job is today and what that means. So we'll go ahead, Jill, and start with you.
Okay, thanks. And hi, it's nice to see everybody. Thanks for turning on your cameras. It's always nice to get a dialogue. So I work at NASA. And when everybody thinks at NASA, they usually think astronauts. They maybe consider the last landing we had last week and a Perseverance on the surface of Mars. We do a lot of cool things that hit the news, but we do a lot more than that as well. There's human exploration, there's science, there's aeronautics, and there's space technology. But below that level, there's a lot of fundamental research that goes on at the centers. We have to grow and innovate at the foundational level so that we can enable all that cool stuff that you see on the news. We have 10 centers at NASA, and 4 of them are research centers, and I'm at Langley Research Center, which is the oldest research center. We're about 104 years old now, and I help oversee the work that we do in research with that comes from computational facilities to testing facilities, research across the board. It's our largest organization at Langley, and we do wind tunnel testing, computational work, fluid dynamics, all that kind of stuff. So I help oversee that as Deputy Director of Research.
Great. And Karen, you could go next.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone. Very humbled to be here amongst all of my wonderful colleagues here. I would say that Saildrone, while we are a startup company, we support pretty much all of the US government. NASA is one of our clients. So going to Jill's comment about NASA does space, but they also do a lot of things related to like earth science. And of course, ocean drones do everything from sensing the water quality to providing better air to sea influx for better weather observations, which I'm sure we all would appreciate, right, to have better forecasts. We do maritime domain awareness for the Coast Guard to keep our ports safe. And this is all autonomously, but particularly for extreme weather, we do a lot of support both for Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, as well as for emergency support, for disaster support, both before for weather prediction and afterwards for marine debris and C4 contouring. And we also do some support for the Department of Navy and the Department of Defense generally. So it's kind of a wide range of things. I, as the legal officer, provide both legal, policy, regulatory, and legislative support and lead all of those efforts. And it's a lot of fun, actually. So thank you.
Great. And Rita, if you could go next.
So great to be here and to see all the faces on Zoom and also to learn something about the really interesting careers of my fellow panelists. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of Muna Therapeutics, which is a new biotech company founded by scientific founders based in Europe that I met somewhat serendipitously or helped them shape their scientific research into a concept that was funded by some venture capitalists and became a real company employing scientists both in Europe and in the US. And I also work for a venture capital company advising them on company creation, how to translate work that's being done in the lab that has a therapeutic orientation, mostly in the area of neurology and rare diseases and cell and gene therapies, creating companies that bring value to the investors, but in particular to develop medicines for patients. So both at Muna and at Novo Ventures, I am working on concepts for neurodegeneration for diseases like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's, designing a scientific strategy and executing it with a team of multidisciplinary scientists working in everything from molecular and cell biology to pharmacology and toxicology, regulatory, IP, marketing. So very, very diverse group. And I've been a science junkie since I was at Northwestern, and I'm really glad to be at the phase of my career where I'm still kind of deep in the science, but hopefully having an impact for patients facing diseases with tremendous unmet need.
Great, excellent. Hello, Robert Paredes, and I am honored to be here today. I actually am tied to a desk because with my normal job, I'm 80% on the road across the United States. So being here and not in front of people is quite the change as it has been for the last year. But I work for a company of Jackson Healthcare, which has about 13 companies. And our main goal at Jackson Healthcare Business is really provider staffing and technologies to the healthcare entities across the US. In my position as VP of Strategic Accounts, I lead a corporate team of business development executives that form partnerships with major health systems across the US to provide physicians and advanced practitioners to ensure that patients have access to a healthcare provider. And as you can imagine, during COVID, access to a healthcare provider and the surge of patients, we have been very, very busy providing those doctors and advanced practitioners to facilities as well as COVID field hospitals all across the US. So that's my role here at Jackson Healthcare.
Great. Thank you all for that wonderful overview. And our next question has to do a little bit more about your career path after Northwestern. So obviously our arts and sciences students have so many directions they can go in after their time as a Northwestern student. And of course, once you've even started along your career path, you might decide to change directions along the way. So would love if each of you could give us kind of the elevator pitch for your career path since you've left Northwestern. So Robert, we'll start with you this time.
Oh, certainly. Well, as a high schooler and growing up, my parents always expected me to be the doctor of the family, and it was a high expectation. And but that obviously that didn't happen. However, and it didn't happen even though I was pre-med, and I knew I had to take all the science requirements for that, so I continued on with that. But when I decided I didn't want to go to medical school and the cost and all of that was involved with it, I did know that I always wanted to be in the medical healthcare industry. The funny evolution of that over my career is that I initially studied to be a doctor. Then I landed a long-term career in selling to doctors. And now with the company I'm with, I sell doctors. So it's been quite the evolution in the healthcare field that I've been involved with, and my career path, which has been very interesting. Essentially, I've been fortunate to build my knowledge and expertise and working in several regions in the US for the companies, as well as several countries in Asia where I was an expat overseas. And all of this has been very rewarding. So as much as undecided as I was beginning in college, it really worked out. I set my sights on keeping into the medical field, and I've been happy ever since.
That's great.
All right, Rita, thank you.
Thank you. So when I went to Northwestern, I was the first person in my family to go to college. First generation immigrant parents. And I thought being pre-med was the thing to do. And so I was pre-med. When I got there, I became really interested in the emerging field of neuroscience, had my first lab-based research experience and basically never looked back. Was committed, I think, from early in my time at NU to doing research. And it turned out that neuroscience was my first love in that arena. So after graduating, I did a PhD first at the University of Chicago. Then my mentor moved to the University of Texas. I finished up my PhD there. I did postdoc training at WashU in St. Louis, which was at the time sort of a very creative group of faculty and postdocs like me, many of whom were interested in pursuing academic careers. So there was a lot of mentoring and a lot of support for that, which I think is really important if you want to pursue kind of hardcore science as a career opportunity or as a career path. And so I took a faculty position at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine in the Department of Neuroscience, moving to Philadelphia with my young family. And I ran a research lab for about 25 years, working in synaptic plasticity in development and in the context of disease. In about the last decade of my academic career, I was working on a set of novel diseases that a clinical colleague had discovered. And working on those pathophysiologic mechanisms led me to become interested in therapeutics for those diseases. So I went from academia to biopharma. I was at Pfizer and at Sanofi for about a decade in total, leading large groups of scientists, both in the US and in Europe, working on different disease concepts, bringing a number of concepts to the clinic and one concept all the way to phase 3. As you may know, it takes quite a long time to get concepts from the bench all the way to registration, but was very gratified to have had that experience. And then at this point in my career, really toward the last phase before retirement, I decided to take that experience and try my hand at leading a company working in very innovative and creative space, sort of platform building, doing something a little bit different, hopefully very impactful, but also riskier. But I feel fortunate to be at the point where I can use my expertise to do something a little bit out of the box, and then took on the responsibility of advising investors on where to put their money for both value creation and job creation in science, and I'm enjoying that piece of it as well. But I think the thread that's run through my entire career is staying as close to the science as I can. And that's what's brought me a lot of pleasure.
Great, thank you. And Karen?
Well, I think that I'm not, my pathway was definitely more circuitous than the two prior speakers. As a chemistry and a French major, I was really kind of sort of equally interested in both sides. And I would say that upon graduation from NU, I did about 1 year, I took off. I knew I was going to go to some kind, either graduate school or medical school. I did get into medical school. I'm so glad I took the year off to really think about what I wanted to do versus Robert, your experience really resonated with me. My parents are first generation immigrants. My father has like 3 PhDs. They're all science-based. He's a big engineer. You know, medical school was the way to go. And I really feel fortunate that I was afforded an opportunity to figure out what would be best for me. And by taking that year off, one of my mentors said, hey, you know, I have this friend who is a partner in a law firm. You know, would you consider, maybe because he's doing patent law, maybe you would be interested in this area of intellectual property law? And sort of like Rita, I got the opportunity, I took it, and I've never looked back. So my legal degree is really focused on intellectual property law. And that is really what has kept me tied, I think, to scientific disciplines. I was very interested early on evolving emerging technologies, particularly satellite technologies. In fact, I did 25 years. I served as the NOAA Satellite Program's General Counsel. I wrote the laws that made all of the commercial imagery ubiquitous. So like all the navigation that we have in our cars to get places, none of that existed. I wrote the US Commercial Remote Sensing Space Policy, which President George W. Bush signed, and it still stands today. So, and I just really followed what was exciting and I was passionate about. And I realized that that's very fortunate, that I've been very fortunate. But I think that if you really think about in Hamlet, when Polonius says, to thine own self be true, it really is, there's a lot of wisdom in that, because then it really doesn't feel like work. You go where you think you can add value, you can be impactful, you can meet new people and learn and be challenged. And that's how I really ended up going from satellites to, on the opposite end, ocean drones, which seem very unrelated, but actually satellite and space law actually is founded in the law of the sea, because there was nothing else to use as precedent. So see, there is a connection. And so this is where we're a very well-funded startup, but we are a startup nonetheless. But it's just been a really wonderful ride, and I really have to say, Northwestern just gave me such options. I would say. Thank you.
Great. And then last but not least, Jill, for your path since Northwestern.
So I just made a harsh realization that I've had the same work phone number longer than y'all been alive. So that's a little hard for me to handle right now. But my career path has been pretty straightforward, actually. I graduated from Northwestern in '99, and I immediately came to grad school at George Washington, which happened to have this satellite campus here in Hampton, Virginia. And it was half the graduate courses that you took, and then half the research side, which was at Lassell Langley Research Center. So I started and got my foot in the door there, and have really worked at NASA ever since I left Northwestern. But it's not like I've been doing the same job. So I've been doing, like, half my career has been technical and half of it has been management. So in the technical world, I was working the Mars missions, the Perseverance lander that you saw, that was me 10, 15 years ago, helping to land the Mars spacecraft Phoenix on the surface of Mars. So I have helped with aerobraking, which is getting an orbiter to the planet and have it circling around the planet using drag to slow it down and getting it into orbit. And then I worked 2 of those Mars missions, and then Mars Phoenix, and then I've done some oversight work with some missions to date. But then I got into management and doing some people management, project management, and now organizational management. And I've worked everything from science missions, which I talked about, to human exploration stuff, helping to enable commercial companies get to space station, and NASA vehicles as well. And now I'm kind of stepping in foot into the research world. So I've had the same phone number, but I've been doing different things. And it's been very exciting kind of seeing every different aspect of the work that NASA does.
Well, thank you all for those amazing insights, and really neat to see about all your different paths that you've taken. Now, kind of zeroing in on that first step after you graduated from Northwestern. I know you kind of touched on a little bit of that each in the last question, but for a lot of our, particularly juniors and seniors, really thinking about what that next step's going to be, that first job, that first internship, that's really going to set them on their path after graduation. So if you could talk a little bit about kind of that first next step you took after leaving Northwestern, and if it wasn't your plan A, can you tell us a little bit more about how you approached getting to the next stage of your career? So Jill, we'll start with you this time.
Sure, yeah. So it's really great that y'all are listening to these panel discussions, because I didn't do that when I was at Northwestern. Here it is April of my senior year and had no idea what I was gonna do. So when you have no idea what you're gonna do, usually people just sign up for more school, right? So I applied to several planetary science. I had a physics degree, physics and astronomy at Northwestern. I didn't have any idea what I was going to do with that. I thought maybe consulting, maybe, I don't know. I had no idea. So I applied to a couple planetary science schools, but then I applied to one engineering school. And I happened upon it because I don't know if you saw bulletin boards on the sides of like your hallways I guess I was in tech at the time, or Dearborn, but I saw an application for graduate school, and it had, like, I wasn't in tech, right? I was in College of Arts and Sciences, and I had no idea what engineering was or what that aspect was. So when I saw the list of classes as it's grad school offered, I'm like, what in the world is that? I saw orbital mechanics, planetary atmospheric flight, guidance, navigation, and control, and all these words that I'd never heard put in a sentence together. So that really, really appealed to me. I kind of threw all my eggs in that one engineering basket and I got in. So that was what, and it helped that I had some really, really cool research experience at Northwestern to help push that along. So I think that's part of one of the questions later. I can probably get into some of the research experience, but so that was, it wasn't what I expected to do, but I kind of tumbled in it and I've kind of snowballed since. So it's been super fun.
Great, thank you. And Karen?
Well, I think as I touched on earlier, that I had a plan that totally was not really a plan. I was able to take some time off. I did get it. I applied to medical school, got in. I was able to defer because I realized I was having some hesitancy on what I really wanted to do. As I said, I worked in the lab. And I realized I am not a lab person. Like, this isn't going to work for me long term. And as I said, I feel very fortunate that I had that opportunity, because I do think there are people who, take that leap of faith. Sometimes it works out, but a lot of times it doesn't. And at least I learned that early. And I was afforded an opportunity to try something that never crossed my mind. And honestly, I'd heard about intellectual property, but I didn't really know what they meant. And just realizing that there was such a breadth and that there was a way that I could leverage what I do love, which I do love technology, into something that, and I write, if I may say, I write very well. So for me, being able to like marry those two skills really helped. And, I haven't looked back with any resistance. As I said, I just feel very grateful that I was afforded that opportunity.
Thank you. And Rita?
So I knew after my first lab-based research experience that that's what I wanted to do. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to follow that passion. I have to say, that the experience of working in a lab and getting to know grad students and postdocs and an academic mentor was really impactful. It helped kind of leverage my experience at Northwestern to graduate school by having not only a scientific recommendation, but a personal relationship with people who had achieved what I wanted to achieve. And that mentorship was really important. I didn't fall into the mentorship. I have to say I was pretty intentional about it. I was given the advice very early on in my undergraduate life that you have to shop for a mentor almost the way you shop for a partner in the rest of life. And that has really turned out to be true. So I ended up talking to a lot of people. I really wanted to understand what I was getting into and if I thought I would like it. And I knew it would be a long slog. So I was incredibly fortunate to identify a mentor who remained a mentor much of my career at Northwestern. And by the time I got to Penn and was an academic myself, I probably had maybe something like 75 or 80 undergraduates go through my lab at Penn, most of whom wanted to go to med school, but only a portion of whom actually pursued that avenue. A number of them took a number of different routes. I felt really strongly about paying it forward and being a good mentor in return. And what I asked of my undergrads was that when they got to the point in their own career where they could impact someone else's early choices and helping them figure out what they were good at and what they were passionate about, that they would just pay it forward. So I think that the thing that really influenced my career path from the time I was at NU to this day is just taking advantage of mentoring and building a good network and calling on it when I needed it and being ready to return the favor.
Wonderful. And Robert?
Yes, well, like Jill, I came to my senior year and had no idea. In fact, I was pre-med and studied all the way up till the MCAT. And then it was at the MCAT that I decided, oh, I'm not taking this. I'm not going this route at all. And so I was kind of late to the game of kind of where I wanted to go. And my first job was working in order processing for Avon Products as an operations supervisor. And it was a great experience having a leadership role straight out of college. But operations and the cosmetic industry was not exactly what I wanted my career in. But what I did learn is to Rita's point and others' point is that networking is very important. And I did learn that a lot of company executives had roles in sales early in their careers, business development, marketing. And that's where my interest then pivoted into the medical business side, the marketing side of things. And so that is kind of where I led. And so I knew I had to get some sales experience. So I sold business equipment. But then was thinking of pharmaceutical sales, but I happenstance through a network who knew that I graduated from Northwestern, gave me the ability to get into medical surgical sales. Because typically, even me as a hiring manager back when, I could never hire a person who didn't have medical, experience. Well, how do you start medical experience if you don't, medical sales if you don't have medical experience as well? So that's how it worked out, which is great. And I think what really positioned me well is that since I was pre-med and had a lot of the sciences, it fit well into the medical devices that were fitting in there. My desire of working internationally, because I was a political science major, really fit in well because my concentrations were comparative political systems and international relations. So it worked out in the end for me.
Great, wonderful. So our next question, we'd like to take you guys back to your time as Northwestern students and hear a little bit about some of the impactful experiences that you had during your undergraduate years in Weinberg College. So this can be anything from how you explored the curriculum to, in fact, memorable classes or professors, any student groups you were involved in. And if this happens to apply to you, would also be curious to know if there's anything that you didn't do during your time at Northwestern that you wish that you had. So Robert, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll have to try to keep this short because that's a lot of information. But essentially, probably the biggest impactful thing about NU is, I'm first generation immigrant parents as well. And my immigrant parents wanted their children to be as American as possible, and not, not speak the language, just, do everything American, which, we regret at the time. But so we were very close-minded, if you will. When I got to NU, my goodness, the diverse backgrounds of all the students, of my roommate, of whether it be socioeconomic, culturally, difference of opinions, things of that nature, was probably the most impactful experience I had from Northwestern. I think the benefit of Northwestern is we have a lot of students that come from all different types of backgrounds. And it not being a state university per se, you have people from all over the world as well, as far as students are concerned. So that was probably my most impactful. And it allowed me to understand culturally. It helped me fit in, into other cultural and other organizations that I may have been apprehensive of being involved with. And my involvement opened up my eyes and the realms of different worlds, which just paid off really greatly for me and my family at this stage now. The clubs that I had been involved with were where I actually was the owner, the founder and president of the first Filipino Students Association on campus. I'm not sure if it's there anymore. I was part of the Greek, I was in a fraternity, which is not there anymore as well. But the one biggest regret that I have is I did not know anything about internships. And I think it's almost, now it's almost a given that you take an internship while you're in college. And I see that being such a tremendous value to students in school, whether it be one internship, two internships, or somewhere away. That is the one thing that I do regret by no means. So hope that's helpful.
That's great.
Thank you. And Rita.
So I want to maybe talk about my non-science experiences and how those were impactful. I have to say that being focused on research, the opportunity to do research really very early in my undergraduate career, I think I was a first semester sophomore in my first lab. That was very impactful. Started out washing dishes and ended up at one point killing all of a particular kind of brain cell in the Chicagoland area. We had to drive to Madison, Wisconsin to get another vial. And I still laugh when I think of how naive and clumsy and awkward and terrible I was at lab work and how much patience my fellow lab mates had with me and kind of showed me the ropes. But I have to say that I really want to echo what Robert said about not only the diversity of the Northwestern community, but how much I learned from my fellow students about things that I just didn't know and was sheltered from, kind of growing up in a relatively conservative immigrant family. I learned a lot about people's backgrounds. So to Robert's point about the kind of diverse cultural perspectives, had phenomenal, late night discussions that I very fondly remember to this day. Learned a lot about people's ambitions and kind of what they were thinking about that they wanted to do, and thought, gee, that's interesting. I wonder, would I like doing that? Or should I go talk to so-and-so? It was a very interactive and collegial group. And I was fortunate to have a group of friends who were active at NU, both in the Greek community and outside of the Greek community. Philanthropy turned out to be a very big thing, and the arts, sort of journalism. That was kind of my circle, was not just scientists, and I was greatly enriched by that. My biggest regret is that I didn't take more non-science courses, and I never studied abroad. It wasn't as big of a thing back in my day as it is now, but I really regret that I didn't do that. I think I would have really benefited from it, considering that for much of the rest of my career, kind of ended up working somewhat internationally. So that's certainly a regret. Memories are terrific. And I have to say, my entire NU experience really, really facilitated getting to every next step in my career.
Great, thank you. And Karen, your impactful experiences.
I think I would echo what Robert and Rita just said as far as the diversity. I mean, growing up on the East Coast, particularly in what they call Plastic City, which is a planned Columbia, Maryland is like a planned community. And then going to the Midwest, which I really didn't know anything about, you know, I mean, I've read about it. I knew nothing about lake effect snow, and my family is originally from the Caribbean. So I can tell you that I do think, Rita, there's something to being sort of bioengineered for certain weather, because I can tell you, I came homesick every break. I would say that first of all, it's such a beautiful campus. Like I mean, I still think very fondly. I think the people there are coming from many different places, but there was such pride, I think, from all the students in being a Wildcat, being at, you know, actually being admitted to Northwestern. And I think the professors that really impact me actually were more on the I would say the humanities side, mainly because they did really forced me to like push my envelope. Like I remember this one is a French professor, but she said, you know, I really think you need to, you should look at Latin. And I'm like, why would I ever look at Latin? But honestly, it was like one of the best classes I ever took. Like I would never have taken it, but it really stretched me intellectually. And I realized that, frankly, the foundations of all of our words are coming from there. So that probably would be a good thing to learn it just from, you know, just for your own edification. But also the mentorship. I think the professors teach by example, and you are right, Rita, about the paying it forward. I would say I had very strong mentors on both sides when I was at Northwestern, and that continued through law school. And I have since then also, in fact, that is one aspect of my career, even as, you know, an executive, is like seeing that spark in people and just helping them to bloom. Like that to me is like the best feeling ever. And especially when they go beyond themselves, like they didn't realize that they were capable of these things. That is just the best. And so I really think that that is something about Northwestern that is very different than many other universities that I've you know, interacted with. I think there is that strong sense of collegialism and also giving back, which I think you can see from all of my colleagues here. We want to give back to all of you. So thank you.
Great. And Jill?
So some impactful things for me from Northwestern. So I don't know if they still do this. They probably do, and I don't remember what it's called, but my freshman and sophomore year, you had to pick a couple classes from like 5 different buckets. And the intent was really, they were kind of English class that were hidden in some other fun theme. So I took classes in architecture, anthropology, economics, art, music, world religion, classes that I knew I wasn't going to major in, classes I knew that I didn't have any interest in pursuing like long term. But in the end, they made me a kind of a smarter person, just getting more well-rounded. And I think that's impactful that other colleges I don't think really do. So, and that actually one of the classes too is astronomy. And that was, I took that freshman year. And that's really kind of what formed my career at Northwestern. And along the lines of internships that Robert spoke of, and this is another kind of a advice to use, listen to your parents or listen to, you know, your figures of whom you follow. My mother told me when I was early in my career at Northwestern, she said, find a professor, even if they don't have an internship program, find a professor that research that you like, that you find interesting, and ask if you can just volunteer, intern, do some work with them. And I did that. And I found Professor Giles Novak, who is still there in the departments of art, of physics and astronomy. And I joined his research team and for a couple of years. And in that second year, it was my senior year, he was working on submillimeter polarimeter for Antarctic remote observation. And I helped, it's essentially this receiver that goes on a telescope. And I helped install this receiver on the telescope at the South Pole. It was a 3 to 4 week effort, and I was down in Antarctica, and it was the coolest research experience ever. I loved every second of it. But what I realized down there, and this is kind of like formed my career from then forward, is that there were other professors down there, and I was essentially doing engineering work. I didn't know it at the time, but I was helping with cabling, electronics, mechanics, just putting things together. And there was a professor from the University of Wisconsin who was there. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you're pretty good with your hands. Have you ever considered engineering? And if I can offer you any advice, listen to that kind of feedback, listen to it and act on it. This is a door is opening, you know, it just opened a door to an opportunity that I had never considered before. So I'm doing this research down at the South Pole, putting stuff together and hear an offhanded comment and think about it. And that's when I found the bulletin board. And I'm like, hey, engineering, everything kind of, the puzzles start fitting together. So that single research experience helped shape the rest of my career from that way forward. And it's just, if anything, it's just opens the doors to opportunities. It opens your mind to what you want to do. And hey, maybe another one of those, maybe my anthropology class, maybe that would have done it for me. And maybe I would have followed in a completely different direction. But the fact is that Northwestern opened those doors for me and gave me the opportunity to look all around and see what's out there. So that was probably one of many impactful experiences I had, and how the curriculum helped me. Student groups, I wasn't really involved in a lot. I was in a sorority, and that took a lot of my time. I loved every second of it. Regrets? I don't think I have any. I just live your life how you want to live it. I love Chicago. I would take every opportunity you can to explore the city. If you haven't, visit, just experience it all. Just take it all in. But I don't have any regrets.
That's great.
Well, thank you all. And we're kind of coming up on the last 15 minutes of our time together. So I do want to leave ample time for our student questions. So students will move to our Q&A. If you do have a question for our panelists and want to say it out loud and directly to kind of further that conversation today, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and I can call on you. Or if you prefer to have me read your question out loud, just feel free to send that to me in the chat. All right, and Ted, looks like you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you everyone for the talk. It's really great. I have a specific question for Rita about transitioning from academia into like more of the startup and venture capital world. So I'm a second-year PhD student myself, so I'm kind of heavily involved in like the academia world and thinking about like transitioning there kind of post-grad. So I was wondering what advice you'd have and kind of what are like some of the differences that you see between like academia and like industry or venture capital area.
I always viewed academia as very entrepreneurial. When you're running a research lab, you know, you are coming up with the idea for the product. You have to get funding to make the product. You have to hire people to help you make the product and run the business. You've got to advertise the product. You've got to, you know, present the product. I really, from the time I was an assistant professor, thought about it very entrepreneurially. And frankly, the best advice I was ever given post NU and early in my graduate training was to network. And that helped me get my first academic job. And absolutely, it helped me make the transition from academia to biopharma. And I started networking when I was the stage that you are, which is a young graduate student, so early in my PhD training. When you go to scientific meetings, you should look for the posters that you're interested in from people who are working in industry in those areas. Introduce yourself, follow up with an email. People think about networking as LinkedIn, and I know LinkedIn is super helpful in this pandemic year because it's a great virtual tool, but any opportunity you have to put eyes on somebody and really make a personal contact, I would take advantage of that. Sometimes you can ask people to introduce you to people that you don't know by email, or even set up a quick Zoom. It doesn't have to be an hour meeting. It can be just a 15-minute quick, let me ask you a question about this. But I think you need to build and nurture your network early on. I can't stress that enough, how important that is. To tell you the truth, a lot more similarities between academia and biopharma than you might think. People say, oh, they're so different. I don't really see it that way. I think you have to be willing to to go in the direction in which the company has identified strategically, as opposed to an academic scientist who could do anything they wish if they can get funding for it. So there is a certain component of that, but innovation and creativity and just fundamental new knowledge are very highly valued in biopharma and biotech as they are in academia. So I hope what you find if you make that transition is that they're more similar than different, with a lot of different opportunities across the entire biomedical ecosystem, beyond just working for a company or working at the bench. Project management, supply chain, marketing, regulatory. I mean, there's so many aspects that your scientific training will stand you in very good stead.
Thank you.
Great. And any other questions, again, please feel free to submit in the chat or raise your hand. And I love the kind of avenue we're going down with the last question, particularly around networking. And we'd love to kind of just open it up to the rest of the group to, hear what advice you have for networking within your industry, particularly as we're all kind of navigating the virtual environment. And any other ways that you would say that your roles have kind of shifted due to the global pandemic, and kind of advice for students as they kind of embark on a job search over the next few years.
I think if I were to say anything, and Rita touched upon it, is obviously networking is so very critical. And I have to say that it was all of my career experiences and opportunities were through networking. I mean, they certainly were. One thing I think in this pandemic stage here and virtually networking, or as LinkedIn has evolved as well as being kind of the go-to networking tool, sometimes it goes overboard. And so one recommendation that I would have for you is, and I constantly get connection requests all the time, is the important thing is when you're going to make a connection request, for example, all you students up there, feel free to connect with me. But what I would ask is you put a note on there. Hey, it was great to meet you. Thanks for your words of advice. And this was during the Waldron, Zoom event that we did last week or yesterday, things like that. So I have a context of that connection and where you're from. Otherwise, you'll have hundreds of connections that you'll just randomly not know where they were originally from. And you want to be able to make that connection, because later on, should you need a connection from me or some help or some advice, you want to talk, yes, remember we talked, and I can, again, make that connection back with you and be more open to say, oh, yeah, that's right. There is a worthwhile connection there. There's a valid connection on it. And keep in mind, a lot of the executives that you try to reach out to are extremely busy, and even some of the higher levels don't even manage their own LinkedIn. They have their assistant managing their LinkedIns as well. So that's probably one word of advice that I would have as it relates to connecting on LinkedIn.
So I'd like to add to that too. So in this connected, everybody's on Zoom, and sometimes they're not. And just make sure you keep people's health, make sure they're okay. Reach out to your friends, reach out to the folks that are stuck at home, whether they're coworkers or friends or neighbors or whatever. Reach out and remember, this is not easy for anybody. So you've got to make sure to insert some personal caring into the virtual environment too, which is very difficult to do. It's important what you're all doing. You have all your videos on. That's important for me to see you. It's important to have that human interface, and we're all people. We're all struggling a little bit. If whether the introverts might be doing okay, us extroverts are having a hard time here at home. So just make sure to look out for each other, and that's really kind of the main advice I can give you in this virtual world, is to look out for everybody. Make sure everybody's doing okay, because it's the people that really make a difference. And I've had people at NASA tell me, we have no technical problems at NASA. They're all people problems. And it's in every business. It's all the same way. All the issues, it's usually something with communication or with avoidance or something, but it's usually something personal. So to further your own career development, whatever you're working on, just make sure you don't lose sight of the people behind it.
Erin, anything to add on networking?
I think I would say, though, with LinkedIn, I would say be strategic. Don't just send out like blasts to people, like make certain that they're really important connections that you want to make, or even if you are doing a leap of faith, that this is something that, because this is kind of, to me, that's like your first intro, like to people, to who you might end up working with, or who might be willing to extend their network for you. And so many times, like Robert said, you're getting like bombarded with connection requests, and a lot of these people, there's no real connection to what you're doing or your network. It's more like I don't know what their own impetus is in connection, but I would say that I try to remember to be very strategic in the connections, because there's a value in your network. I guess that's what there's value in your network, and then the network that you are developing. And I think that is really important. And I would say that with the exception of one job, which I sent out 600 resumes, and this was straight out of law school. So I'm just setting the bar right now for everyone. The way I got the job was actually, one person saw something in my resume, they handed it to someone else, and that was definitely their network. And once they pulled me in, I realized I really have never had to interview ever again. Like, everything has been through networks. So there really is value, again, back to my value of your network that you're developing. Some of you are more involved or have more developed networks, but I mean, try to think long term, because it will really serve you well. It will really serve you well.
Wonderful, thanks. And I think we have a question from Alice. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, first of all, thank you guys for taking the time to speak with us. So right now I'm a second-year student studying bio, and I love bio, but I'm kind of at a point where I've kind of hit a wall, and I'm having doubts about like what I'm doing and what I'm studying. So I was wondering if you guys ever had those feelings, and if so, how are you guys able to overcome these moments of doubts and like kind of find your passion to move on?
Maybe I can just give an insight. I absolutely had the same experiences starting from the time I was at Northwestern. Kind of your first, defeat in a class, you didn't do as well as you thought. The first defeat in the lab. Just many experiences. And I think in research, there is a lot of failure, and I think it's kind of important to learn something from those failures and move on. One of the things I happen to love about scientific research is that, when a door closes, a window opens, and you just have to kind of stop and take a night off and regroup and look for the window. And not to harp on this topic, but again, if you have a good network and a good circle of support, and in this case at Northwestern or wherever you are in your career, you can, tap into that support network. And look for the encouragement and the advice, sometimes the very granular advice about what you should do. And again, value of a network. To this day, I'm on a Facebook group called Academic Research Moms that is kind of kibitzing about research careers, but just providing support about, the victories and the defeats, and helping each other through it, just to, and find the passion again, and keep your eyes on the passion. So again, your network's super important for that, whether it's local or global.
Yeah, I'll quickly relate to an experience. I took biology as well, and as much as I initially liked it, I just got really tired and didn't really feel passion about it until I worked in the lab, and I had to dissect fruit flies to get ovaries out and use a fluoroscope to kind of do all that work in. And I got so motivated about the equipment and everything else that led me to the desire to get into the medical device world and things of that nature. And so, albeit it was biology, but it was really the offshoot that related passionately behind it that really it really took off on it. So, and I do have to apologize because I've got to go. I've got a 2 o'clock major presentation I have to give to big clients. So I'm going to have to sign off here. But last, as I sign off, connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure to make the note so it's meaningful and I know where it's from. And certainly feel free to reach out whenever. To my panelists, thanks. Great to meet you. I will connect as well.
Good luck.
And I have to run. Thank you.
Okay, good luck on your presentation.
Thank you.
Great. And I know we're coming up on the end of the hour. So Jill or Karen, anything you want to add for our last question?
So I just, to add to the question that Alice had, so you're building your foundation, every experience that you have, you're piecing together who you are. And whether your life starts from right now, it doesn't start from when you were born, it starts from right now. And you can take whatever path, but you have a diverse set of experiences that maybe somebody else, maybe you decide to quit biology altogether. I tell you what, every year or so, I think I'm going to chuck all this NASA stuff. I'm going to go ahead and make cupcakes for a living. It happens. And sometimes, but you know what? Those experiences all help you develop your future, because whether you end up as a biologist or a chemist or a pharmacist or whatever cyst you want, you have your unique set of experiences behind you. So don't let that get frustrated. It's building you up and building you for something else that you want to be. If you continue to go straight, that's awesome. But if you choose to do something else, that's awesome too.
Great. Karen, anything to add?
I think what you've heard from all of us, we all took different paths. We all stayed true to who we were. And I would also say that be aware that it's not failure. Maybe that wasn't the gift for you. Maybe you have another gift that is just waiting through exposure, which is one thing that Northwestern really is very good at doing, opening the aperture. Maybe that is really where you are going to you're going to light this world on fire. So I think it's only in retrospect and through wisdom that you realize that, wow, I'm so glad that I made that right turn, because if I had done this, I wouldn't have gotten to know about this. Like that, it's really, that's how you get to know who you are, what you can be really true to. And don't worry, it will all work out. I promise it will work out. I just remember, that is something I regret. I think I fretted a lot that senior year. And I think if I could say something to my younger self, I'd be like, let go. You'll be okay. It's going to work out. You're hard workers. That's why you're here. It's going to work out. So just relax. Just relax, and pieces will start to fall in place.
Wonderful. Well, that's, I think, a wonderful note to end on. I know we just hit the end of the hour. So Azealia and Molly, apologize we didn't get to your questions, but as I mentioned, we will be sharing all of our panelists' contact information after the panel. So please take advantage of the opportunity to follow up if you'd like to further connect and get those questions answered. And for students who are on our call today, ordinarily for our in-person Waldron programs, we like to order lunch for you from a local Evanston eatery. Since we can't do that, keep an eye on your inbox. We're going to be sending you a $20 Grubhub credit that you can use over the next week. So lunch is on us. And also encourage you to keep an eye out for additional programming that we have planned for the Waldron program towards the end of the winter quarter and then for the spring quarter as well. So that'll be on our website. And also you can keep an eye on your email inboxes too. And finally, thank you so much again to our wonderful panelists for being here. Awesome conversation, really great insights from you all. Just so grateful for your time and energy and enthusiasm. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and a wonderful weekend. Go Cats.
Thank you. Go Cats.
Go Cats.